And then all the thoughts about cancer has been refuted. So that was based on really poor animal research, rat research, has since been refuted by tons of studies. So we know artificial sweeteners do not cause cancer.
Speaking of weight loss, losing weight, people going on these diets like going vegan or going carnivore, are there any inherent dangers to going vegan or carnivore? Like, is there a reason why it won't work? I mean, carnivore, there's a guy, his name is Tristan Lee. He's under 5% body fat. He's like 18, 19 years old. He's shredded. Like, just, you wouldn't even believe it. He's carnivore. And he's like, and you visually see this guy and it's working for him. And then there's other people who are vegan and they're doing amazing, but are there actually dangers towards doing this? Like, if you don't know what you're doing, what could go wrong?
Well, with carnivore, I say a lot could go wrong. I'm definitely against the carnivore life. I think that we need carbohydrates. I think we need some balance. In the case of veganism, I mean, there are opportunities to get all your macronutrients there and fruits and vegetables. Like, I really think that that's important. Fiber, I think it's important, even though the carnivores don't. I think fiber is important. But I would say, like I said before, there's always going to be metabolic outliers who we see on YouTube or Instagram who are taking on these really extreme lifestyles like carnivore or frugivore, and they can thrive and their body looks great or whatever. And so we think, oh, it must work for everyone. No, I would say for the vast majority of people, the carnivore lifestyle is not going to be a good one to take on. Veganism, I think, like all kind of dietary restrictions, I think that, of course, there are risks associated with taking on any form of restriction if you don't have some information and some knowledge about nutritional gaps. But like in the context of vegan, for example, yes, you'd want to be paying attention to B12, vitamin D, calcium, iron, protein, omega-3, etc. So this is where having a little bit of either education or some one-on-one coaching with a professional like a registered dietitian could really help to just like basically help you plan out that diet to ensure that there are no nutritional gaps. And that also usually comes with a requirement for you to have some cooking knowledge as well, because taking on any kind of restrictive diet, I mean, even as something as just like a weight loss diet, generally requires you to do a little bit more food prep as well. So I think that's a skill that more people need a lot more of.
Yeah, for me personally, I preach having all four food groups. Not that you can't get the energy you need, the protein and stuff being vegan, but I think it's easier if you're eating all four food groups. But a lot of people are, they love their animals and they're just doing it. Some people it's for ethical reasons, others for their own reasons or beliefs. But I've actually been accused of being an animal abuser multiple times, even though I have 9 animals permanently in fosters. We've had 17 animals just because I eat meat. So what is your personal opinion on the whole like eating meat thing? Like, do you see that as animal abuse? Like, what does that come from? What can you add to that?
I mean, like you, I also have been accused of being an animal abuser or even like a child abuser for serving my children animal products. I obviously disagree with that statement. Like you said, I think it's possible I think it's easier, of course, if you do not have any restrictions, it's going to be easier for you to meet your nutritional needs just because you have more options and more choices. But I think that if, for whatever reason, you want to take on a vegetarian or vegan lifestyle, I think there are a lot of ways to do that in a really nutritionally balanced way, assuming that you have a little bit of that nutritional knowledge. I think that, everybody has their own belief system when it comes to food. Food has become political. It's become almost like a bit of a religion in some cases. And if you feel strongly about omitting animal products, I think that that's a valid choice. And I support people of the wide range of dietary choices. I think, of course, I'm a big supporter of more plant-based lifestyles. But I don't think that gives anybody permission position to be shaming somebody else for their food choices if they choose to incorporate animal products in their diet because that's what's best for them. So in my case, for example, I've never been vegan. I've never been strictly vegetarian. I did a few years ago make an effort more from an environmental perspective to just reduce my consumption of meat, and I focused mainly on like eggs, more vegetarian sources and things like that. But I recently had a diagnosis of some IBS issues, and I had to really cut back on my FODMAPs. And as a result of that, I had to there was a trade-off there. It's like a lot of these beans and legumes, even though I know that they're so nutrient dense and I know that they're so great and they're better for the environment, I know for my health, I cannot eat a lot of those. So I need to get my protein now from animal sources. And that is the trade-off that I've had to make. It's like, morally, like my morals and ethics based on the environment versus my actual physical health. So yeah, I think that everybody has to do that analysis for themselves, and we should just be supportive of one another's choices.
Yeah, I feel like you. I feel like I support anyone that has the choice and wants to be vegan, vegetarian. That's great for you. I just don't think they should be kind of forcing it on other people to have their same exact beliefs, because a lot of us, we think differently, but it doesn't mean that just because we think that we're right, that everyone has to think like us.
Yeah, and my take-home message with regards to plant-based diets is that I think that if we all just reduced our intake on and reliance on animal products just a little bit, if everyone did a little, like their part basically, by reducing a little bit and incorporating some of these other plant-based sources of protein into the diet, we could have a much bigger impact than having everybody shouted at to go completely vegan when they enjoy animal products. It's just not realistic for people to expect that the whole world is going to switch on a dime and become vegan, when I think a much more realistic goal is for us to just kind of start to slowly reduce our reliance on those animal products.
Yeah, absolutely. Like, I always ate meat, and I've recently come out. I have a cookbook with vegan options. I'm making a vegan vegetarian cookbook as we speak. A lot of the options, like I'll have a sloppy Joe. I just called it a sloppy Greg, and I have a vegan sloppy Greg. I eat that one all the time rather than the meat, but doesn't mean I'd eat no meat. So to me, I make some changes and I promote some vegan items, but yet you still get the hate, and it's like, hey, I'm doing somewhat good, but no, they just want to hate on you. So it's a shame for me, but I'm going to still do what I'm doing.
Okay.
Earlier, you mentioned that you could drink 3 cans of pop a day and then lower it to 2. That could help you lose weight. It's more realistic. What about switching completely over from regular pop to diet, artificial sweeteners? Personally, I won't drink regular pop. I'm all for artificial everything in massive quantities. To me, I have a saying, no calories, no problem. Like, I really am that strong a believer. What are your personal thoughts on artificial sweeteners, aspartame, you name it? Are you a fan of those? Is it okay in moderation? Or, like, really, from a dietitian's perspective, am I going to just kill myself early because of this, or am I good to go?
I don't think you're going to kill yourself early because of this. I think that artificial sweeteners obviously help some people, like probably yourself, but they also can hinder others. So, I mean, we have a lot of conflicting research when it comes to artificial sweeteners. We have some research that shows that artificial sweeteners do not trigger the same reward pathways as actual sugar, and therefore they can kind of cause some kind of sugar cravings or sweetness cravings, and there's a concern that then you would go and consume more sugar. However, we also have other research to suggest that it refutes this, and that actually it can lead to consuming fewer calories, obviously creating a bit of a deficit. So again, it's like different strokes for different folks. For me, I'm always concerned about the microbiome, and we have some preliminary research looking at the effects of artificial sweeteners on the microbiome. So that's very early research. A lot of it's animal research. So, I mean, nothing to concern ourselves with too much right yet. But of course, I like to kind of keep on top of that. And then all the thoughts about cancer has been refuted. So that was based on really poor animal research. Rat research has since been refuted by tons of studies. So we know artificial sweeteners do not cause cancer. For me, the biggest downside of consuming a lot of artificial sweeteners is that basically it can train your palate in some ways to enjoy and want that level of sweetness. So I know, for example, when I was pregnant, I was taking 2 stevias in my coffee at the time, and I slowly weaned myself off. And now the taste of even just like a little bit of sugar or sweetener in my coffee is repulsive to me. And I also find that the flavor of fruits and vegetables is a lot more sweet, a lot more intense. So basically, what my take home message for people is, I don't care if you like sugar, maple syrup, stevia, Splenda, whatever your sweetener of choice is, just try to use a little bit less of it, and just work your way down over time. I think it's just better for just training your palate overall, but I don't think there's an actual inherent danger here in consuming artificial sweeteners.
I like that, training your palate, because from my perspective, if when I was a kid, I ate like horrible. Like it was just like 5 bags of chips. It was all candies. It was all junk food. It was 6 donuts from Tim Hortons before a bike race. It was a bag of chips and French fries after. It was just eat whatever you want. But I was like Mr. Active. I was doing around 20 hours of cardio a week. I was training for triathlons, and I could eat anything. Now that I'm older and I'm not doing as much activity, I switched over from like the regular pop to diet pop, regular pudding to diet pudding, and I basically made a cookbook with every single thing that has sugar and swapped it over to artificial sweeteners, lowered the calorie content in the foods, and so basically took normal foods, whatever, you name it, and made it into something lower in calories, because my palate was trained to like junk, and I can't get rid of it. So now I've swapped over to the artificial sweeteners. And so what I'm hearing you're saying is you should just have as less of that as possible, but still enjoy it, and that it's not causing cancer, because that's been a huge, like, people have been saying that for years. 25 years ago when I studied this in university, it was like, oh my God, you're going to get cancer. And it's like, the research is not there to support that. And even if it does, it was at such a high amount. I think it was 36 cans of Coke, Diet Coke a day for 20 years before it might do something. And I mean, I drink a lot of aspartame and different things, but not that much. So for me, just go ahead and enjoy it. Now, if you don't have any sugar, you eat your strawberries plain, your blueberries, and you start adding it on, then you go back to having it without it, you kind of miss it. So where you had your coffee and you had the 2 packets of sweeteners, and then after you had none, and now you find it weird. If I have strawberries without the sweetener, I kind of like, it's not quite there for me. So I add it on anyway, but it prevents me from eating the chocolate bar or the cake or the higher calorie stuff. So I eat this. It allows me to feel like I'm still enjoying what I'm eating, but with less calories. And that's what's resulted in, I mean, I'm 45 years old now, and I'm actually leaner and better shape than I was 25 years ago, just because I'm doing bike riding and all that. So it seems to work for me. So like, what is my strategy? Does that make sense? Or is it really, maybe that you mentioned the microbiome, is it really that dangerous? Like, what could happen? Like, worst case scenario here.
Well, worst case scenario is that we don't actually have the research yet to prove the worst case scenario. If we want to be extra conservative and cautious, my personal, and this is not my professional, but my personal gut feeling, and this is why I cut back on sweeteners while I was pregnant, is that I have a real concern over preserving the integrity of the gut microbiome. And like I said, disclaimer, we do not have research to suggest yet that definitively that artificial sweeteners are causing harm to microbiome. There's early research to suggest that it may be an issue in the future. But I think we are still kind of keeping our eye on the finger on the pulse on this. So I think that worst case scenario is that it does shift things in your microbiome. I know for me, I've got gut issues already, and I know just from consuming artificial sweeteners that certain sweeteners do cause me to have digestive upset. But if you've collected the data for yourself through eating these things regularly, that these are not an issue, then I don't really see a whole lot of harm. If you personally want to learn to appreciate the flavor of a strawberry by itself, yourself, then that would be a goal that you would want to set for yourself. That would be a goal that I would want to set for myself. But if that's not of importance to you, then there's no point in me even kind of mentioning it. But I think for a lot of people, if it was like my kids, for example, I would say, yeah, I want you to learn how to like roasted broccoli or roasted Brussels sprouts or whatever without them needing a crap ton of maple syrup on top. I mean, that's a great goal, but
I think this is
realistic for everyone, especially when they have like trained their palate to need a lot of that sweetness. It's something that you probably have to work on over time.
I think this is a great question. I think a lot of parents would appreciate this. They have kids and they want them, obviously they want them to eat healthy. Who doesn't want their kids to eat fruits and vegetables and all this? What if they hate it? And you don't want to put a bunch of sugar. You're a parent, you care, I want my kid, they're all 50 pounds overweight, they're 14 years old, whatever. And you're like, how can I help this? And rather than putting the sugar on the strawberries, they put the artificial sweetener on it, or they give them the Diet Coke instead of regular Coke. Do you think that's a bad move by the parent? What is your personal opinion on that? There's no wrong answer. What do you personally think about that?
I do not recommend artificial sweeteners for children. We don't have
what
a lot
age?
of research.
Like,
what age should this be at? Like children, like 6-year-olds? Anything under 18? Where do we draw the
kid
line? It's a
line?
really great question. We just don't have a lot of research on children, probably because of ethical reasons. So I personally wouldn't, as a parent, be comfortable giving my preteen or even teenager a lot of artificial sweeteners. I mean, I think ultimately when a child becomes a young adult and they are able to make their own decisions about food, they need to be responsible for their own choices. And you can train them, you can work with them all throughout their early years. But ultimately they get to a point and they're going to eat whatever the hell they want. Like you said, like after practice, they're going to go to the convenience store, the 7-Eleven, and they're going to buy whatever they want. And so they're out of your control at that point. So my job as a parent of 2 young children at this point is to try to not obsess over the nitty gritty and the nutrients that they're consuming at any individual meal. I am really concerned about what I call the long game. So I want to raise competent eaters. I want to raise eaters who are able to be put into any food and eating situation and be able to navigate that. So for me, that means not demonizing foods. It means exposing my children to as many foods as possible, even if they don't like that food. That's okay. They don't have to eat it, but it's on the table. There's an exposure there. That's step 1. And step 2 might be, hey, if I've exposed them to that food enough, they're maybe going to want to put it on their plate. And then after that, maybe they're going to put it in their mouth. They may not swallow it, but it's a long game trying to raise competent, intuitive eaters. So that's how I think of things. And in terms of like putting sugar or salt or fat on my kids' foods, again, I see these all as just tools in the chef's toolbox. And if putting a little bit of kind of maple syrup, or sometimes I put sprinkles in my kids' like oatmeal and things like that, or some chocolate chips, if that makes the oatmeal or the naturally nourishing, healthy food more appealing and more likely to be tried, I think that's a win in my books. So it's all these little tactics that are going to make kind of exposure more palatable for these kids.
I have such strong opinions on this. I mean, I was a school teacher. I taught physical education. I saw the schools and the different, what they allowed to be given to kids and what they called healthy, like pepperoni is healthy because it's a meat, and like the highest of fats of cheese, this is great for you. And I'm like, ice cream they would give out on like health day I'm like, ugh. And so I had such strong opinions. My personal opinion is we've brainwashed society, our kids are to see food as like a celebration for everything. It has to be junk. So here's the birthday, here's the cake full of sugar, eat as much of it as you want. It's Friday at work, everyone bring in donuts and candies, and you just won the baseball game, we need to celebrate with ice cream. So we're conditioning kids over their entire childhood to see food, especially high calorie dense foods, highly palatable foods, as a reward. And then they're overweight, and it's, hey, you're a kid. You're supposed to just eat anything you want. You're 50 pounds overweight. You're 15. And then all of a sudden they're 19 and they move out of the house and they're like, wait a minute, I'm not healthy. I don't like how I look. And then they don't know anything because they haven't been taught, and they don't know. And so they go on YouTube and it's this fad diet. This is going to help you lose weight. This is what's going to help you get to your dream physique. And they fall for every scam out there. And to me, the problem is we need to start educating kids at an early age, which I used to do as a phys ed teacher. I was teaching the kids, like, you should eat an apple instead of chips at recess. So not that I'm saying, like, we have a different view on this. I think, like, vilifying foods. Like, I'll say a chocolate bar, that's bad kind of food. Apple is good, but it's not that you're bad if you eat the chocolate bar, because I support people to have like a snack and to use moderation. But there's a clear difference between some foods are inherently just healthier, others are not as healthy. So I think it's more important to show young kids these are healthier food choices and these are not as healthy food choices. So try to eat mostly these. So do you agree, disagree? Do you think, no, we should just give them whatever they want? Don't think about it, because if you think about it, you're probably going to develop disordered eating when you get older. Like, where do we draw the line here?
I mean, I don't think it's to say, I mean, I don't want to put so much pressure on parents to think that if they call a chocolate bar bad, that they're going to cause an eating disorder in their kids. But I think, I mean, parents have so much stress on them. That's a horrible feeling. But I think that my approach, and the approach that's grounded in evidence right now with child feeding, is to try to be more neutral in the way we talk about food. And what I mean by that is, rather than saying, okay, this food is good, this food is bad, eat more of this, it's going to keep you healthy, a young child is not going to understand that. They're going to hear in their head that, oh, that coveted chocolate bar that I can only have on special occasions must be so special that I need to sneak it, that it should like it. And so and then they think, well, those vegetables must be so gross if mom's forcing me to eat them before I have my treat. So one of the strategies that I use and I recommend for young children is to actually serve a small single portion of whatever the fun food is, whether it's like a couple tiny cookies or like a little tiny scoop of ice cream or whatever. I actually serve it with my kids' main meal. They don't have to eat the whole thing before they get dessert, because I don't want to teach my son that he needs to fill himself up full and then overfeed himself with dessert. I want him to listen to his body and just eat to satiety. And what has actually come of this practice is that sometimes he'll eat the cookies first, and sometimes he'll eat the broccoli or the potato or whatever else is the pasta, and then he'll come to his cookies when he's ready. So to him, in his mind, they're all on neutral playing field. The cookie is not so special and so coveted and like, something that he needs to obsess over, that he needs to gobble them up so fast that before somebody else takes them away from him. That's what I'm trying to avoid. Is I don't want my kid to get constantly into scarcity mentality when he gets around sweets, because he's going to go to a birthday party, he's going to go to school. There are going to be a lot of opportunities for him to eat these kinds of fun foods when I'm not around to kind of navigate the situation with him. So what I'm teaching him, again, through a long game, is that it's no big deal. He can have cookies now, but he knows he's going to have cookies at dinner later. So it's not like this is a one-time deal. It's not a cheat day.
I love this, because I was literally going to just ask you right after this, what do you think about having dessert after dinner? Because for me, having it labeled dessert, it's automatically saying, oh, that's the good stuff. And dinner, I got to get through this to get to what I want. And I was like, what do you think of that? And you're like, feed it at the same time. So I love that, because I was thinking, that is one of the problems. I mean, I go to a restaurant and it's the dessert comes out at the end. I'm already full. And then it's dessert. But I'm like, oh, but I like that dessert so much. I guess I'll find some kind of room in there somewhere for it. And I'm like, why isn't it just all at the same time? Because by labeling dinner, dessert, you're automatically categorizing food as this being the better one.
Yeah. Exactly. And that's exactly why I try to avoid that kind of language even. People ask me, well, what do I call it then? I say, just call it what it is. Say, today we're having cookies. Today we're having ice cream. Today we're having pudding. The same way I call broccoli. Like, broccoli doesn't have its own class to be called. It just food. It's just the food that it is. So that's how I usually talk about those things.
Yeah, and my breakfast, lunch, dinner, like all these things, I'm eat the same thing at any meal. I don't care. Like I'll eat French toast for supper and I'll eat pasta for breakfast. Like I have no like this is a breakfast food. My girlfriend 100% opposite. How are you eating fish for breakfast? I'm like, well, what's the difference? It's a meal. But yeah, like I totally see food as just food and I'll eat it in any order. That's just me, but I don't think most people think like that.
No, it's just societal kind of habits, I think, as well, that we get into. But I agree, it shouldn't matter when you eat those things.